notes for the 20s. So we'll do a review worksheet, huh?
Did someone just log on?
Yeah.
That sounded like someone.
Did it? I don't know how they would. Wouldn't have my code. So unless it was somebody that was just a hacker.
Yeah, hacker.
Well, you're about to get educated, hacker. So that's probably a good thing. Or my personal FBI agent. So
Say hello to them though.
She said hello.
So we're gonna do these notes, and then we'll do a review worksheet tomorrow, and then we will we'll play the review game on Wednesday, and we'll take your test on Thursday, so that you do not have to have a test when you get back from Thanksgiving, because that would be terrible.
So nice.
You think we're gonna do a pep rally on Friday?
So I would assume so.
Yeah.
So this is not gonna work. Yeah, well. So. That's weird. So yeah, and then when we get back from Thanksgiving, we'll do Great Depression, New Deal. That'll take about 3 weeks or 2.5 weeks, and then we will do 2 weeks for Christmas. We'll come back, do World War II, and just keep on trucking. Keep on going. So the last couple of things that we need to talk about for the Roaring 20s is the Great Migration, which was a time where a great majority of African Americans were moving out of rural areas and into the north, to the cities. So they moved to the cities from the south. Okay, so this is a movement of about 6 million African Americans from rural South, that's a hard word to say, to cities like New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Detroit. It's the largest internal movement of an American population. So African Americans became urbanized at the end rather than a rural population. So before the 1920s, more African Americans lived in like the countryside. And then after the Great Migration, they lived mostly in cities. So northern cities became significantly more Black, more diverse than ever before. Now, I do want to bring up a couple things. Just because they moved up north did not mean that they did not experience some kind of prejudice, some kind of racism. It was a lot better, but there was still prejudice, okay? Just so you know that it wasn't like it was some magical fairy place where they went and there was no more bad stuff. So here's showing where they moved out of and then into different places. There are still, a large Black population in the deep South, in like Alabama and Georgia and stuff like that. But there's more Black people that live in northern cities now. So that's just how it be. What was I gonna say? Can't remember. Think about all the things that they brought with them when they went to the north. So, music, food, culture, religion, dress, art, all of those things that were brought with them. Imagine if like 500 Chinese people moved to Mineola.
Wow.
Right? That would be a lot, right? And so you would think about how Mineola would change. We'd probably have some more Chinese restaurants. They'd probably be better, more authentic Chinese restaurants. We might even have like a Buddhist temple that came up.
We'd have Chinese grocery store.
We might have a Chinese grocery store. We might even have like town parades, like the Chinese New Year parade. There'd probably be a lot more red lanterns around.
You know them big old long dragons they got?
Yeah, those big long dragons and stuff like that. So they might even, if there were enough students, they might even offer Chinese as a language instead of Spanish, So stuff like that can change an area, pretty fast and Now, I was gonna say something, I can't remember what it was. Brain fart. So things that push people out of the South: racial violence. The KKK was bigger than it had ever been before. Oh, there I am. Lynchings were still happening. Blacks in the South were stuck in this cycle of debt and poverty with sharecropping, which was left over from after the Civil War, where you you paid a white farmer to work this land. You bought the tools and the seeds and everything from the same white landowner. And in the end, you owe him money. So like and he determined when you got out of debt, so it was like this cycle of debt that was terrible and hard to get out of. The Jim Crow laws, so segregation, no voting. I mean, there were laws where if you passed a white person on the street, on the sidewalk, you had to get off of the sidewalk, So things like that were just ridiculous that they were trying to escape. And then also sundown towns. Have you ever heard of a sundown town?
We can't be there after sunset.
Great Saline was a sundown town.
That
And
billboard
up
for a
until
while.
I think the late 70s, they proudly displayed a sign in their town that said basically, I'm paraphrasing, but if you were black, you could not be in the town after sundown. And if you were, your safety could not be guaranteed. Violence would probably come after you,
But it was like 10 times worse than what it actually
Oh yeah,
said.
what it actually said was not. Yeah,
No.
I can't say those
No.
things. But yeah, when soldiers were riding on the train from like Dallas to wherever and Shreveport or whatever, and they passed Grand Saline, they were told not to look out the windows and not, because such violence and just hatred. People in Grand Saline used to just get up every morning and drink Haterade. I'm telling you. But they weren't the only sundown town. There were other sundown towns in East Texas and in parts of the South. There's a Wikipedia article about sundown towns if you're interested. There's a town called Jasper, which is in deep South Texas. And I remember when I was a teenager or when I was a little bit older, there was an instance, there was a murder where these white guys like drugged this black man behind their vehicle, and so they had a big old thing. But I remember them talking about it being a sundown town back in the day, so that kind of prejudice and racism that just ran really deep, in some places. They also had droughts and floods they had to deal with, and boll weevils, which would destroy crops. There's a lot of crap, that made you want to just get out of Dodge. Pull factors, there was economic opportunity. I mean, if you hear about them hiring at the Ford Motor Company where they're paying blacks as the same amount as whites, that's a pretty good deal, right? And they're making 5 times as much as people in the South were making. So come on, let's go. Just this idea of like having like rights and unity. There were, it was for like a new adventure. You can't hate that. Moving mostly to Chicago, Detroit, and New York, industrial towns with booming industries and towns with supportive networks. There were neighborhoods that came up. There were, segregation wasn't enforced like it was in the South, but there was still unofficial segregation in the North, like I said. So there were still some things that had to be dealt with. But cities in the North, because of the massive immigration from all over the world, cities in the North were more diverse than cities in the South. Obviously, we live in a little bubble. I mean, you think about, think about where you live, and if next door a Muslim family moved in next door to you, that might be kind of weird for you, right? You might be a little suspicious. You might not know what to think. You might be a little scared. Human beings are like that. Human beings are by their nature scared of things that they don't know. Things that are different to them scare them. But if you grew up with a Muslim family living next door and you played with the kids and you like knew the parents and stuff like that, and you were like, oh, who's that? Oh, that's just Abdul, no big deal. Then that's like different, right? Because like you're used to it. We live in like a little bubble here in East
Closed-minded
Texas.
people.
Well, and sometimes that's just ignorance because you just haven't been exposed to it. If you guys went to school, like we got a new Asian kid who'd be like, oh my God, that's so exotic. Oh my God, right? But like, if you lived in Dallas, you would literally be going to school with kids from like all over and you wouldn't think anything of it. Yeah, what's up, Aubrey?
Like in Brock, there were more Asians and African Americans than there were white.
Right.
Like,
So it was like no big
really-
deal. It was like, yeah.
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
basically the normal.
We just fragile human beings where we just get scared of things that we don't know. What did the migrants bring with them? They brought illiteracy, They brought political inexperience. They brought economic despair. You know, if all you've ever known is poverty, right? And all your grandparents ever knew was poverty, and all their grandparents ever knew was poverty, then, you know, it's kind of hard to get out of that cycle of thinking, well, I was just made to be poor, right? Or, like, you know, if you go to school and everyone hates you, right? Just no one talks to you and everybody hates you. And then you go to a new school, even though you have a new opportunity to make friends and stuff like that, people don't know you. In your brain, you may be stuck in that mindset of like, well, everybody hated me in my old school. They're probably going to hate me here. That kind of mindset, you know? And so you have to be careful, because even if you go to a new place, you take yourself with you. You have to be careful of those things. And so that kind of traveled with African Americans as they moved to the North. You know, racism and prejudice, there's a lot of feelings of that. You kind of, you know, if people have always hated you and then you walk into a room, you might assume that people are just going to hate you when you walk into the room before you even give people an opportunity. And that's just general like generations of emotional abuse that African Americans like had to deal with. It's pretty terrible. But on a positive note, they also brought with them music and poetry and food and culture and art and religion and all kinds of awesome things. So this is what I want you to know, that there was a shift in a Black population from a rural population to an urban population. Okay. We good? Back page, right before Harlem Renaissance. So, speaking of Harlem Renaissance, it was the birth of the jazz age. Sometimes the 20s is called the jazz age because jazz was the big thing. Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Lena Horne, these were jazz musicians who brought it to the forefront. Here you have the Cotton Club, which was a famous club there in Harlem where they played. And I'll talk about that more in just a second. So that's what it looks like, the Cotton Club. 1920s, many African American artists settled in Harlem, New York. And so you see this resurgence of Black art and music and literature. Some of the art back then was very bold with bright colors and like geometric shapes. Very cool.
What was the last one from the last slide?
Hi, Ben. That's pretty cool. Her hands are awful big. I don't know what that symbolizes. You know, in literature class, you always talk about like, what is the author meaning when he says like the forest, was gray. Like in art class in college, we always have to like, figure out what is the artist's intentions. What are they trying to say here?
They're just like drawing big hands.
Yeah. Or maybe he was trying to say he knew a girl who was like, I don't know what to say. Is that good?
No, I need to go up one.
Right there?
Oh, maybe another.
There?
There we go. Thank you.
My bad. I didn't go over that, but I'm going to talk about it in a minute. Here's some more art. So you see a lot of like tribal African themes with like the masks and stuff like that. You see a lot of the bright colors. I like this one. This one's cool. It's like all swirly. There's a lot of movement in it. Movement. I dig it. I like it. I like art. You should expose yourself to lots of art. It's good for you. Here's some poets. Claude McKay, he wrote If We Must Die, which condemned lynchings. County Cullen taught high school in Harlem, wrote about African Americans. Langston Hughes, you will read about Langston Hughes in English class. Me and Miss Pollard already talked. So you'll read some stuff that Langston Hughes wrote. He protested racism and acts of violence against Blacks. Great author. And then Zora Hurston, who just looks awesome. I mean, she's just a fashion icon right there. But she went to the South and she collected folktale songs and prayers of Black Southerners. You think about Black Southerners at the time, where most of them couldn't read or write. They've got these songs, they've got these prayers, they've got these stories that have been passed down from generation to generation. So she goes down there and writes them all down and collects them so that they could be saved for future generations, which is pretty cool. Also, she's a fashion icon. Major effect of the Harlem Renaissance: African American cultural pride flourished in the cities. There's another example of a very bright colors and large shapes and stuff. It's almost like the music. You can hear the music being played in there. Love it. So cool. Art's fun. I like art. Just took more art classes. Art and history is art and literature is very connected, and then art and history is also very connected. You can tell a lot about what was going on in a place by the kind of art that people made, either visual art or written art. So sometimes it overlaps. The jazz was born in New Orleans. It was created by African Americans. It was a combination of West African rhythms, spiritual songs, European harmonies. People like Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Lena Horne. And that club that I showed you was called the Cotton Club. I don't know if that's supposed to be a detrimental word, why it's called that. I don't know. But it was a white only business that was in Harlem. So while you would go there to see Louis Armstrong play, Louis Armstrong couldn't go to the Cotton Club. He had to go in the back door. He couldn't even go through the front door. He had to go through the back entrance. He couldn't eat there with everybody else. He had to eat in the kitchen. So even though he could go there and he could perform for all these people and get standing ovations and everyone was raving about what he was doing, he, as a black man, could not, on his day off, just come up there and be a patron of the place. Pretty terrible. I heard a quote one time, and I'm paraphrasing it. I heard it this summer, and it was, "If only we learned how to honor black people as much as we honor black culture and music and stuff like that." You know what I mean? We honored the people, black people, as much as we honored their music and their, you know what I mean? Only we could do that. The world would be a better place. There's the Cotton Club. $1.50 is a steal.
Well, nowadays.
Yeah, it's true. There's Louis Armstrong, jazz trumpeter and singer, very influential. Where are you going? What's happening? Are you leaving me? Are you just packing up and getting out of Dodge? Is it a minute to the bell? Is that what you're doing? There's Josephine Baker, first black woman to star in a major motion picture. Duke Ellington. Yeah. Well, you guys are going to have to read the rest of it because I don't have time to go over the rest of it, so good luck.